branch officials.
The question hit Washington like a shockwave. How deeply had a cartel-armed drug pipeline embedded itself into ordinary American neighborhoods without anyone noticing? In the cold, gray stillness before dawn, as tactical units rolled through quiet streets and helicopters carved shadows over rooftops, the answer began to unfold in real time. Homes that looked unremarkable from the outside concealed industrial pill presses, vacuum sealers, assault rifles, and fentanyl potent enough to kill entire towns. Families awoke to the distant thud of armored vehicles, unaware that federal agents were dismantling one of the most dangerous criminal ecosystems the Pacific Northwest had ever faced. What else had been hidden in plain sight, and how long had it been operating beneath everyday life? The event detonated across Washington state in a coordinated sweep. Federal task forces operating under President Donald Trump's renewed national security directives launched a 36-hour sequence of simultaneous raids stretching from Centralia to Snohomish County. According to briefings aligned with Reuters and DW reporting standards, this was no routine narcotics operation. It was the takedown of a fully integrated cartel supply chain, moving fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and stolen firearms through a network designed for speed concealment and survival. Tactical teams breached fortified doors in industrial parks, residential suburbs, and remote rural compounds, uncovering a logistical machine engineered with brutal efficiency. Key developments emerged within minutes. Evidence flowed rapidly: more than 100,000 fentanyl pills, 34 kilograms of fentanyl powder, 8.7 kilograms of cocaine, 3.7 kilograms of meth, and nearly a kilo of heroin. Alongside the narcotics agents seized 34 firearms, many linked to violent crimes from Tacoma to Everett. Inside one property wall, insulation stuffed with cash and narcotics revealed the network's careful attempts to hide transactions from federal surveillance. The early findings aligned with patterns identified by The Guardian, and Jane's analyst cartel affiliates increasingly pair weapons trafficking with fentanyl distribution to secure routes, intimidate rivals, and control territory. Strategic analysis from federal sources painted a stark picture. This was not an isolated criminal ring, it was a regional node in a hemispheric supply chain stretching from Mexican production hubs to U.S. metropolitan corridors. The weapons recovered were not incidental, they were the infrastructure of violence that protected the drug's personnel and money. The seizure of suppressor-fitted AR platform rifles, extended magazine handguns, and sawed-off shotguns demonstrated a tactical sophistication previously seen in cartel-linked groups operating along the southwest border. Intelligence teams confirmed the group used Phoenix as a staging point, funneling shipments north through Interstate 5, an artery long monitored by Homeland Security but increasingly exploited by hybrid criminal networks. The human impact resonated across communities. Residents in Centralia, Tacoma, Sammamish, and Snohomish had lived for years surrounded by a hidden pipeline of fentanyl, an opioid responsible for tens of thousands of American deaths annually. Parents who lost children to overdoses now understood the scale of the machinery that fed the epidemic. Local leaders praised the raids, but asked a painful question: how much poison had already reached their streets before the supply chain was severed? The balance between security and civil liberty came into focus as neighborhoods processed the sight of armored vehicles and federal agents on their blocks. Some saw safety restored, others saw a reminder of the delicate line between enforcement and overreach in a democracy. Now that the first layer of the network has been exposed, the country faces an unsettling question. If a cartel-armed pipeline was operating this deeply in Washington state, how many similar networks remain invisible across the nation waiting to be uncovered? The scene unfolded with the precision of a military operation, multiple counties, dozens of targets, and one synchronized moment when the quiet of dawn shattered under the weight of federal force. At 4:17 a.m., while most residents slept, armored vehicles rolled into position, tactical teams stacked at reinforced doors, and overhead surveillance from federal aircraft painted a moving map of targets across western Washington. In that breathless silence before the first breach, one question rippled through every command channel: how many armed suspects were waiting behind those doors? The answer would come within seconds. The event ignited as the clock struck the coordinated go signal. According to operational accounts consistent with reporting standards from Reuters and Defense News, the 36-hour crackdown was engineered under the national security umbrella reinforced by President Donald Trump's law and order directives. This was the execution phase of Operation Take Back America, a multi-state effort designed to strike cartel logistics nodes, simultaneously disrupting them faster than they could regroup or signal warnings. From Lewis County to Snohomish, entry teams teams breached locations with remarkable discipline. Flashbangs erupted across rural lots, warehouse doors peeled open under hydraulic force, and silent entry teams slipped into residential properties without waking nearby families. Key developments emerged in rapid succession. By sunrise, 12 properties had fallen. Agents uncovered industrial pill presses coated with fentanyl residue, encrypted phones, heat-wrapped drug packs, and weapons staged for immediate use. At several locations, suspects attempted to flee but were intercepted within seconds. One tactical officer later remarked that the suspects never had time to reach for a weapon, a statement reflecting the flawless timing between ground units and aerial surveillance feeding live intelligence to the Seattle Command Center. The BBC and DW have documented similar coordinated operations against cartel-linked groups in Europe, but rarely with the speed achieved in this American sweep. Strategic analysis showed why this mattered. The raids weren't just about drug seizures, they were designed to disrupt a cartel's decision cycle, depriving it of the time needed to counteract law enforcement offensives. Intelligence analysts inside the OCDETF framework noted that this operation struck not only dealers, but couriers, stash house managers, weapons suppliers, and financial liaisons simultaneously. According to insights consistent with Jane's Defense Weekly, hitting multiple layers of the supply chain in one synchronized strike dramatically reduces the cartel's ability to reconstitute operations. Without couriers, weapons access collapses. Without stash houses, drug movement slows. Without the coordinators, the entire pipeline fractures. On the human level, the impact spread across Washington communities. Residents in Tacoma described waking to helicopters circling overhead, unaware that fentanyl and weapons enough to devastate entire neighborhoods were stored a few blocks away. In Sammamish, neighbors watch agents escort suspects from quiet suburban homes that had concealed the infrastructure of an international narcotics pipeline. For many, the sight brought reassurance. For others, it raised questions about how deeply organized crime had infiltrated their seemingly safe environments. The fragile balance between freedom and security surfaced again. How far must enforcement go to protect communities from networks that hide behind ordinary walls? As the dust settled, one haunting question lingered over Washington state. If this level of cartel entrenchment existed so quietly in the Pacific Northwest, what does that say about the unseen battles still unfolding across America's cities and highways, and how many more coordinated raids will be needed before the tide truly turns a... The hidden heart of the network revealed itself in a single warehouse, an unmarked dust-covered structure on the outskirts of Centralia that seemed abandoned to anyone passing by. But behind its steel doors lay a fortress engineered for a criminal empire, a site so meticulously constructed that federal agents later described it as a fully operational fentanyl factory disguised as a rural auto shop. In the dim pre-dawn light, as breach charges sent shockwaves through the structure, what emerged stunned even seasoned investigators. How long had this silent fortress been poisoning the Pacific Northwest without a trace? The event unfolded in seconds. Tactical units surged through the reinforced entry, ready for armed resistance. Instead, they found an industrial layout that resembled the logistical hub of a cartel war room. 25 kilograms of fentanyl powder, over 90,000 pills, 24 firearms, racks of AR platform rifles fitted with suppressors, and insulated walls stuffed with hidden cash. According to law enforcement briefings consistent with reporting standards from Reuters and The Guardian, the warehouse operated as the primary distribution engine supplying King Pierce and Snohomish counties. Cars rotated through in timed intervals. Couriers loaded vehicles before sunrise. Surfaces were wiped after every shift. It was a machine, efficient, silent, lethal. Key developments emerged as agents pushed deeper into the back rooms. A concealed compartment beneath a steel workbench revealed Ledger's crypto wallets, smuggling routes, and coded communications with southern suppliers. The DEA soon tied the property directly to Jose Isabel Sandoval Zuniga, arrested later that morning with 1.6 kilograms of fentanyl in his vehicle. His Sammamish residence yielded even more narcotics and a loaded .45 caliber pistol beside his bed. According to operational documents aligned with DW and Al Jazeera reporting frameworks, Zuniga served as the strategic link between Arizona staging points and Western Washington distribution cells, overseeing transport storage and financial flows with near military precision. Strategic analysis positioned this warehouse as far more than a stash location. It was a command node in a multi-state architecture. Intelligence indicators matched patterns documented in Jane's Defense Weekly cartel networks, increasingly build redundant distribution hubs to withstand federal pressure, allowing operations to continue even if one site is compromised. This particular hub showed signs of advanced planning, layered insulation to mask odors, rotational couriers to reduce exposure, and firearms placed at ready access points in case of rival disruptions or law enforcement breaches. The presence of suppressor-equipped rifles suggested preparation for armed defense, further underscoring the hybrid nature of the operation, half narcotics, half armed militia. The human impact was undeniable. Families living near the warehouse had no idea that one of the largest fentanyl stockpiles in the region sat within walking distance of their homes. Children rode bikes past a building containing enough synthetic opioids to kill tens of thousands. Local parents watched in disbelief as agents hauled out bag after bag of narcotics, realizing how narrowly their communities had avoided mass overdose events. The raid illuminated a broader national tension, the struggle to secure neighborhoods without transforming them into surveillance zones. For many, it was a sobering reminder that even the most peaceful towns can conceal the darkest threats. As agents cleared the final rooms, a chilling question surfaced, one still echoing across Washington state. If a single warehouse could hide this much poison and firepower, how many more ordinary buildings across America mask the operational cores of national and transnational criminal networks still waiting to be uncovered? The deeper investigators dug, the clearer the truth became. This was not just a narcotics pipeline, it was a weapons for drugs ecosystem, a hybrid model that fused fentanyl trafficking with an underground arms trade capable of destabilizing entire communities. In the dim glow of raid lights, agents collected rifles, pistols, and shotguns arranged with chilling precision. Many were modified, many were stolen, some had already been used in violent crimes across Tacoma, Everett, and Kent. And the question loomed like a shadow over every seized weapon. How many shootings, overdoses, and retaliatory attacks had this network fueled before the raid shut it down? The event unfolded as forensic teams traced serial numbers and ballistic signatures. According to analysis consistent with The Guardian and Reuters reporting standards, 34 firearms were recovered across the operation. A mix of AR-15 style rifles, extended magazine handguns, sawed-off shotguns, and weapons outfitted with suppressors. One rifle matched casings from a double shooting in Kent, directly linking fentanyl distribution to local bloodshed. Investigators determined that firearms were not an accessory to the drug trade, they were the currency that sustained it. Guns purchased on the black market were funneled south in exchange for bulk shipments of fentanyl powder moving north. It was an economy of poison and firepower. Key developments surfaced as Homeland Security analysts unraveled communication threads. According to multi-agency briefings aligned with DW and Al Jazeera reporting frameworks, the Washington cell acted as a critical junction between Mexican suppliers and U.S. distributors. Weapons were traded to enforce cartel discipline, intimidate rival gangs, and maintain control over distribution corridors. Local affiliates acted as both dealers and arms brokers, receiving fentanyl shipments that were paid in part with stolen or illegally purchased firearms traced back to burglary rings across Pierce and King counties. This discovery fundamentally reshaped the investigation, turning a drug raid into a national security case. Strategic analysis revealed the larger implications. Jane's Defense Weekly and Defense News have documented the growing trend cartel networks increasingly operate like insurgent militias, blending criminal logistics with paramilitary tactics. The suppressor-equipped rifles found in Washington mirrored equipment seized in cross-border interdictions, suggesting shared suppliers or overlapping training networks. The pattern is unmistakable. Fentanyl routes are no longer purely economic. They are strategic assets for transnational groups seeking territorial influence. Under President Donald Trump's heightened domestic security measures in 2025, federal agencies have intensified crackdowns on this hybrid threat, treating it as both organized crime and a national-level destabilization vector. The human impact of this weapons-narcotics fusion was profound. Each seized firearm represented a potential homicide, prevented a family, spared the trauma of gun violence, a neighborhood saved from escalation. Every kilogram of fentanyl intercepted meant lives protected from lethal overdose. Communities across Washington already grappling with the opioid crisis confronted a sobering truth: the guns on their streets and the pills killing their youth came from the same source. And that source operated with shocking efficiency until the raid cut through its core. As agents cataloged the last of the weapons, a haunting question hovered over the investigation, one that community leaders, federal analysts, and policymakers are still struggling to answer. If cartel-linked networks can merge drugs and weapons so seamlessly in one region, how many more American cities now stand at the intersection of firepower and fentanyl, and how prepared is the nation for the next hidden pipeline waiting to surface? Inside the Federal Command Center in downtown Seattle, the air vibrated with urgency. Rows of screens flickered with live drone feeds, SWAT helmet cameras, and surveillance maps tracing cartel routes from Sonora to the Pacific Northwest. Analysts spoke in clipped sentences. Commanders issued rapid-fire updates. Every agency, DEA, SPD, IRS, Criminal Investigations, CBP, Homeland Security Investigations, was locked together in a unified grid, and the question lingered like static across the operations floor. How long had this criminal network exploited gaps between these agencies before today finally forced the system to act as one? The event took shape with remarkable coordination. The intelligence backbone of the raids followed the OCDTF model and organized crime drug enforcement task force structure refined under President Donald Trump's 2025 security doctrine and shaped by interagency cooperation, similar to what Reuters and BBC have described in cross-border counter-cartel operations. DEA analysts mapped supply routes from Arizona to Washington. SPD narcotics detectives identified local distributors. IRS agents tracked cash movements through crypto wallets and wire transfers. HSI and CBP traced weapons and narcotics back to Mexican suppliers. It was a logistical symphony, one built specifically to overwhelm a criminal enterprise that prided itself on speed and secrecy. Key developments emerged as teams compared evidence in real time. Ledger books, burner phones, encrypted chats, and financial spreadsheets flowed into the command center. Patterns surfaced, payment cycles, courier assignments, stash house schedules, and weapons exchanges tied to specific drug shipments. According to intelligence standards reflected in DW and Al Jazeera, reporting the network operated with a level of coordination usually associated with insurgent groups not local gangs. Arms moved south, fentanyl moved north, money flowed in both directions, bypassing traditional banking through digital wallets and hidden cash caches. The scale stunned even seasoned investigators. Strategic analysis pointed toward deeper implications. According to frameworks consistent with Jane's Defense Weekly and Defense News assessments, this cartel-linked network functioned as a hybrid chain, not quite a cartel, not quite a local gang, but a fusion of both. It leveraged U.S. infrastructure, exploited interstate corridors, and used suburban homes as command nodes. The raids exposed a structural vulnerability in America's internal security model. Criminal networks adapt faster than traditional agency silos can respond. But when those silos collapse into unified coordination as seen in Seattle, the effect is devastating for criminal operations. The Washington raid demonstrated what experts have argued for years: transnational crime must be met with transnational style enforcement. The human impact of this breakthrough extended far beyond arrests. Community leaders from Tacoma to Everett gathered outside courthouses praising the cooperation that finally dismantled the machinery flooding their streets with fentanyl and guns. Families who had lost loved ones to overdoses expressed relief, but also grief, knowing the raid came too late to save many. Officers exhausted from a day of non-stop operations watched residents wave to convoys returning to base. For the first time in years, neighborhoods felt that federal and local agencies were not reacting to danger, they were preventing it. As dawn approached and command center screens dimmed one by one, a quiet question echoed among federal analysts. Now that this historic strike has exposed how effective coordinated enforcement can be, will America commit to sustaining this unified model, or will the system fall back into fragmentation, allowing the next cartel pipeline to grow in the shadows once again? Night settled over Seattle as if the city were exhaling after a day that rewrote its history. Convoys of marked and unmarked vehicles rolled back into their bases, officers stepping out with the fatigue of victory etched into their movements. Inside neighborhoods once scarred by drug houses, porch lights flickered on illuminating boarded windows, and confiscated vehicles lined up for towing. Residents stood silently on sidewalks, processing the scale of what had just unfolded. Yet beneath the relief, a heavier question pressed against the heart of the Pacific Northwest. If this was only one network, how many more remain concealed beyond the horizon? The aftermath unfolded swiftly. Federal prosecutors unsealed indictments in Seattle's U.S. District Court, charging 10 defendants under statutes carrying mandatory minimum sentences of 10 years due to the staggering quantities of narcotics recovered. According to reporting standards mirrored by Reuters and The Guardian, these charges included conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, possession with intent to distribute fentanyl and methamphetamine, and illegal firearms trafficking. Several suspects were repeat offenders, tying the operation to a broader landscape of recidivist violence already troubling Western Washington communities. Key developments emerged as forensic teams continued combing through evidence seized during the raids. Dozens of encrypted phones, ledgers, hidden cameras, and digital wallets hinted at financial conduits stretching beyond Washington into Arizona, Oregon, Idaho, and potentially northern Nevada. Multi-agency briefings consistent with the analytical approaches used by DW and Al Jazeera confirmed that additional warrants were already being drafted. This wasn't cleanup, it was escalation. The Washington raids constituted phase 1 of a larger federal strategy: sever the distribution arm first, then strike the financial arteries that keep the cartel alive. Strategic analysis illuminated the broader battlefield. According to assessments aligned with Jane's Defense Weekly and Defense News, the United States now faces a transnational criminal architecture that adapts with military-level agility. Cartel-linked networks evolve faster than traditional law enforcement structures, leveraging encrypted platforms, decentralized distribution cells, and hybrid weapons smuggling routes that blur the line between organized crime and insurgency. In response, President Donald Trump's 2025 security framework has strengthened interagency fusion centers, enabling the kind of coordinated strike witnessed in Washington. The question now is whether these structural reforms will endure long enough to dismantle the next wave of networks waiting in the shadows. The human impact carried emotional weight. Families who once feared the violence tied to fentanyl distribution expressed gratitude as officers loaded evidence into armored transport vehicles. Community elders in Tacoma spoke of children who never returned home due to overdose or drug-related shootings, reminding the nation that these statistics represent lives, not numbers. For many, the raid brought a sense of justice long delayed. For others, it revealed the unsettling proximity of illicit operations hidden behind familiar walls. The balance between freedom and security surfaced again: how to protect communities without surrendering the very liberties that define American life. As lights dimmed in the Seattle Command Center and agents erased the final red dots from the operational maps, one question lingered like an unfinished chapter in America's struggle against cartel violence. Now that Washington state has witnessed what coordinated force can achieve, is the nation prepared to confront the next criminal network that will inevitably rise, and will the public demand continued vigilance before another hidden pipeline fuels another cycle of tragedy? The Washington raids exposed one of the most sophisticated cartel-linked drug and weapons pipelines operating in the United States. In a 36-hour multi-agency crackdown, federal teams dismantled a distribution network stretching from Centralia to Snohomish County, uncovering more than 100,000 fentanyl pills, 34 kilos of fentanyl powder, multiple kilograms of cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin, along with 34 firearms, many tied to violent crimes. A Centralia warehouse served as the organization's fortified command hub, concealing industrial pill presses, cash-laden insulation, encrypted ledgers, and suppressed rifles prepared for defense. The operation revealed a hybrid cartel model: drugs moving north, guns moving south, and digital money flowing in both directions. Under President Donald Trump's 2025 security directives, agencies fused intelligence using the OCDETF framework, aligning DEA, FBI, SPD, IRS, HSI, and CBP into a single operational grid. The raids marked phase 1 of a wider national strategy: collapse the distribution system, then destroy the financial infrastructure sustaining cartel activity. Communities across Washington felt both relief and shock, realizing how deeply the pipeline had penetrated their neighborhoods. The operation left the nation with an urgent question: how many similar networks remain hidden, and is America prepared to confront the next one before it erupts into violence?